All right, we are live. Welcome back to another episode of From College to Vine. I am Michael Sicoli, joined here by my not quite roommate but sweet mate, Riley Millette. How are you doing today?
Very well. Let me adjust my camera a little bit.
Oh my goodness, not ready. Deducting a
I'm
point
more
right
ready.
there. I'll tell
Could
you
be
that.
more ready. Could be more
Okay.
ready.
Well, we do have a really good show set up, though. In terms of a really good show, it's a spectacular show. We're gonna start off with some smoke and fire. We're gonna go through the current NFL headlines, pop off, see which ones we think are legitimate and which ones we kind of think are just ones that you want to pass by. You're getting a lot of misinformation nowadays with the rumors, draft coming up, still free agents out there as well. We're gonna run through some news first, and later we will continue our rookie rankings, and this time wrapping them up. This is our last rookie rankings episode with going over the top 5 tight ends, because if we went to top 10, we would be banned on all platforms because it's not the
Yes.
strongest group. Not the strongest, but there are a lot of landing spots that can make these guys names that you should watch out for fantasy, especially in tight end premium dynasty formats like that. But before we jump into that, I want to shout out idpguys.org, where I have been able to put up a lot of my content, provide this overlay. And of course, I want to shout out for Frequency's Sake, who is currently hosting this, helped me produce it where we started. That is a heck of a follow at FFSQC on Twitter. You can also follow IDP Guys, IDP Guys on Twitter, and you can follow me at Michael__Sicoli, 2 underscores, and Riley at Riley_Millette. Let's get into the news because we've had a few big ones that aren't super big, but will have surprisingly big impacts when the time comes around. Let's start with your team. Why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. So the Patriots traded a third-round pick for Devontae Parker and a fifth-round pick, a 2023 third-round pick, which will probably be replaced by a compensatory pick for J.C. Jackson leaving in free agency. So I'll start with my initial thoughts of the trade, which is that it's a steep price to pay for a guy like Devontae Parker, who's struggled to stay healthy in his career, and especially in the last few years. He's been good when he's on the field, and he brings an element to the offense that no one else in the Patriots offense does. He's a big body, contested catch winner. Excuse me, that was a crazy voice crack. But I think he's a good addition to the offense. Would I have paid a third rounder? Probably not. I was thinking something like a fifth. A fifth straight up for Devontae Parker was what I thought the compensation would be. But at the end, it leaves a sour taste in my mouth knowing what happened with the Mohamed Sanu trade, which was a second-round pick, right, for Mohamed Sanu we sent.
Yep.
That
disgusting.
Obviously didn't work out. And this kind of stinks to that as well, not quite to the degree, but we'll see what happens.
It's going to be interesting because what the Patriots do well is run the ball. So that's the issue here is how many touchdowns will Devontae Parker get? He historically hasn't been that guy. He had his big breakout 2019 season, scored 9 touchdowns, 1,200 yards, but he hasn't eclipsed 800 yards since, and he hasn't eclipsed 4 touchdowns. And I think the volume might be a little bit better for him, especially any change for Parker from Miami with Tyreek coming to town, Jalen Waddle emerging, even Cedric Wilson getting signed. This is good for Parker in a number of ways, but I don't know how he's going to be fantasy relevant unless he makes a jump in touchdowns. I don't think he's going to command a workload. I don't think he'll command snaps on the outside, but Jacoby Myers is a genuinely good wide receiver as well. Jacoby Myers will see targets from the slot. Will Mac Jones have enough volume to compensate both of them? That's kind of what I want to know.
I wouldn't rule that out. I mean, I think Devontae Parker immediately steps in and is the second best wide receiver, if not the best. You can make an argument that he's better than Jacoby Myers.
Yeah.
I think,
which is not saying much, but yeah.
Yeah, I think Jacoby Myers will command a higher target share just because he's been there for longer. But it'll be interesting to see the use of Devontae Parker in the red zone just because he's such a big guy. Again, like you mentioned, there's not a whole lot of touchdowns to go around in the Patriots offense. So if he finishes with 4 or 5 touchdowns, I really wouldn't be shocked. I would say his super ceiling, if he plays 17 games, is 7, and that's even being a little generous.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of fantasy, wide receiver 30 feels about right. I mean, I'm not going to I'm not going to go hunting for him. If he falls into my lap at a value, maybe I'll give him a look. But especially with a guy who, consistently plays 12 or less games a year, I will treat him with some hesitancy.
This is a situation that can even get more, clustered. I fully expect the Patriots to still attack the position in the draft. I don't think they're done at addressing wide receiver after the lack of impact that they got from the position last year. So I think we can still see a day 2 type of name. I think we see a day 1 type of name. I think there's a lot of flexibility that the Parker moves offers. I'm not in love with it because I don't think Parker's all that. I wish he put it together a little bit more consistent, stayed on the field, but he reminds me of the value that Corey Davis provided last year. I think that's a good comp of what Devontae Parker can bring, which is a few catches. If he scores a touchdown, you're satisfied on the week. I would probably project him for around 905. That's probably about where I'd put him, around that 60 to 70 catch range. I'd have to take off a couple games because I think he'll miss some time. That's just what he's been doing. But it depends on where he goes in drafts. I think he'll end up around that eighth, ninth round range. That's what I probably expect come redraft season. And I might be taking a shot on that, especially if I'm punting wide receiver. Yep. And let's obviously Devontae Parker was not the only move of the day. Also, final note on that. That will probably be, it's been reported and it's common sense, that will probably be the end of the line for N'Keal Harry. Where I think the only reason he hasn't been cut yet is because they are probably still trying to find some random trade partner. Who knows in this crazy, crazy world of ours. But this is probably the fresh start that N'Keal Harry might be needing. That might be on the horizon. So another big trade happened. You're gonna have to stay with me through this because the Saints and the Eagles had a trade where the Saints acquired the number 16 and number 19 pick in this class. They also acquired the 6th round pick. In turn, they traded the number 18, a 3rd, a 7th, a 2023 first, and a 2024 second. Essentially trading a first next year and a second in 2024 to move up and get an extra pick in this year's class. Let's now have 2 first-round picks. Eagles still have what? If I'm not mistaken, they still have 2 as well, right?
Yes.
The Eagles had 3 first-round picks. They now have 2. The Saints now have 2 first here. Now, what does this mean to you?
So my first reaction was they're probably going to take a quarterback with one of these picks. I wouldn't be surprised to see any quarterback not named Malik Willis fall to this range. This is good Kenny Pickett range. This is good Desmond Ridder range. A lot of people are high on him. The last week we ranked Ridder pretty low, but a lot of people are higher on him than we are. This is also a really good offensive tackle class. Now that Teron Armstead is gone, he signed with the Dolphins, so this is like Bernard Raymond / Trevor Penning range if they like either one of those guys. So, and the Saints have been a team with a historically good offensive line, and I don't really imagine that changing. I think they're ready to replace the revolving door at tackle. So, my immediate projection for this pick would be a Kenny Pickett and a Trevor Penning.
See, it's interesting you say that. And obviously, you're saying that for the Saints, right? I just want to make sure I got that correct. I don't think they are looking at QB here. It's an interesting move, and I think it's totally possible. Moving this type of capital is substantial because they are moving a first next year in a very strong class. I think this is more so the reports I've seen and the reports I've read are that they are believing that this team is not far away. So I think they're going to tackle that. I think they're going to go for a Trevor Penning type of guy, a tackle, or whoever they view as the best scheme fit to replace Teron Armstead. But I think they're going wide receiver with that other pick. I think that 16 to 18 range is a perfect mesh of where these guys are going to go. You'll probably see 1, maybe 2 jump ahead of that range, but they should have close to their pick of the litter. And they need the help. It's a hefty price to pay for a wide receiver, but I think that that's the reports I've seen. I think they're going to rock with Jameis and that Taysom Hill duo for a little bit longer. And if they need to figure out down the line, I think they're ready to figure out down the line. But that's the reports I've seen. I think they still have a good defense. I think that's their mentality.
I think we can say the same thing about the Saints about the Patriots. That the Patriots lost Tom Brady. They punted on Cam Newton for a year. It didn't work out, and now they have
Oh
Mac.
yeah,
And the same thing with the Saints. Now that Drew Brees is gone, they tried out Jameis and they tried out Taysom Hill. Both went poorly, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them take who they think is their franchise quarterback for the next several years.
and it's what makes sense, right? Because when you move a first round pick next year, you're taking yourself almost out of the running for a quarterback because we know the hit rate beyond the first round is very slim. You're taking a real crapshoot if you want to take your franchise quarterback outside the first round. That's what the Saints are hamstringing themselves into here. But all the moves would suggest quarterback. I am going to still lean towards the reports that, right or wrong, I think they're still looking elsewhere, but would not surprise me at all if we see a Kenny Pickett, a Desmond Ridder. Honestly, with the coaching change, it's tough to find a scheme fit, but there's a lot that the Saints can still do. And the Eagles still have 2 first-round picks. So in terms of, like I said this last week, actually, that I can't imagine ever did where a team picked 3 times in the first round. So I view this as a given that one of these picks was getting traded. But nothing should really change in terms of that. Your mocks just get a little more interesting. So let's dive into real quick the last bit of news that we want to touch into before smoke or fire. Rashaan Evans is back with Dean Pease and back with Arthur Smith on the Falcons. First round linebacker, former first round linebacker rather. He hasn't really put it totally together. He's flashed over the years. There's a lot to like. I'm bringing him up on the IDP end of this. I liked him as a prospect, and he's a good tackler. He hasn't really got done in coverage. He was a healthy scratch when they came around the playoffs. He missed some time at the end of last season. He only played 12 games. It's a 1-year deal. It'll truly be proven. But we just saw that this Atlanta offense or Atlanta defense put together a 190-plus combined tackle season from Forseta Oluokun. I hope I didn't butcher that. But we saw that they produced a IDP darling, and Rashaan Evans is a scheme fit. He knows this defense. It's someone to definitely look out for. This is a fantastic landing spot for him, and I might not be targeting him, but if I'm a contender on that 1-year short notice, tackles regardless of actual production or regardless of actual talent, he's a name to keep an eye out for, and especially if he's on your wire, which is unlikely, but you never know. It's the offseason. So, Raul, you ready for smoke or fire?
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to kick us off, or do you want me to kick us off?
I'll kick it off because we're going to talk about a guy that I like. So, Ravens general manager Eric DeCosta said, and I quote, "If the right guy falls, we will certainly strike when talking about the running back position." I'll start by saying I think this is fire. I wouldn't be surprised to see them take a running back early in the 3rd round. Even though I'm a big J.K. Dobbins guy, I think he's super talented. And they do have Gus Edwards coming back from injury. But we saw what happened to the Ravens offense when they were without the complete rushing attack. And it kind of just fell apart. They were relying on Latavius Murray and Devontae Freeman, who, they had their fantasy weeks, but they weren't very good real life NFL running backs. And it's tough to rely on both guys coming back from ACL injuries, considering, what the consequences are if neither of them were to fully recover. So if they had a nice running back, let's say Zamir White falls to the 4th round, I wouldn't be surprised to see them
4th round
guy on that. He probably won't. He's one of my.
No, it could happen.
It could happen. And that's what I think he would have to take for them to do that. That team has some other needs. Their secondary is one of the bigger ones, but if the right guy falls, that's part of the key word is that it's a position where we think could use some insurance, but we're not going to go crazy and spend a day 2 pick on someone.
I wouldn't rule out a day 2 pick because this is prime draft talk of someone asked him, are you planning to draft a running back? Are you planning to address the position? It's the same answer as, we're evaluating all positions. We're always trying to improve our team. This is the truth of the matter is that they got no production out of their running backs last year after both Dobbins and Gus Edwards went down on the same day, right in the offseason. And they do own two third-round picks. They own number 76. They own number 100. They also own 110. So there is a lot of range there where they can take a luxury pick where, they have issues on the edge, but they have let me count this real quick. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They have 5 fourth-round picks. If they end up making half of those, I would bet the house that one of them is a running back, because I think we're going to see talent slip in this draft. I don't think there's a lot of teams desperately in need of running back, so you're going to see guys. We saw Breece Hall being mocked to the Giants the other day from The Athletic. That's a very reputable source. And, yeah, they got nothing out of their running backs. Running is obviously a very big part of the Baltimore system. They need more out of it. It makes sense to address it. It's not something that – I'll phrase it to you like this. How worried – let's say they draft Zamir White in the back of the third round. They're at number 100. How worried are you about both Dobbins and Gus Edwards?
I would be worried as a Gus Edwards owner, but I think most Gus Edwards owners also have J.K. Dobbins. So, and again, I fully believe in J.K. Dobbins. I mean, we've seen running backs come back from ACL injuries and still be fine. I haven't seen anything to prove that won't be the case for Dobbins. So I will believe that J.K. Dobbins will be fine and until I see something that he's not. But adding Zamir White to that backfield would leave the situation a little bit more open for Edwards, which even then it's still strange because they signed Gus Edwards to a pretty friendly contract extension not too long ago.
Yeah, and it was somewhat short term, and ultimately it's as simple as this. Tyson Williams is unsigned. They did not like Tyson Williams. Devonta Freeman is washed. They tried out a bunch of guys. None of them really worked. They cannot go into the season with two guys coming off season-ending injuries where they have not played football in 2 years. That can't happen. No team can take that risk. They will address the position. Whether it's the third or fourth round will be very telling, maybe of how their development has gone. It's definitely worse for Gus Edwards than it is for Dobbins, naturally, given the talent gap and investment. But I think it really depends on the name. Ultimately, I do expect them to add in the position. I would say fire to this. So another one I want to bring up real quick, and honestly, I don't think we need to spend too much time on this. We'll make this one a quick one. Rob Gronkowski says he's not ready to commit to a game of football right now, quote unquote. He is going to come back and play football for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He is waiting until mandatory training camp is done so he doesn't have to do the workouts. Guarantee you anything. We have seen it from veterans before. It fits Gronk. And he made a joke earlier this offseason that he wanted to make Tom Brady wait about the same amount of time that Tom Brady made him wait with the retirement and unretirement announcements. Any disagreement there, Riley?
I'm not gonna say it's 100% chance. I'll put it at like an 80% chance. I wouldn't. No, I know you're not saying that, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility that Gronk actually does retire. If I had to put money on something, I would believe that Tom Brady talks Gronk into coming back, especially since Gronk performed pretty darn well last season. So I'm willing to bet that he's coming back. Would I be totally shocked if he retires? Not really.
And I'll touch on this as well of a Buccaneer that retired. Obviously, we didn't bring it up in the news segment because I don't know. We've had a little bit busy cycle, but Bruce Arians also retired in between our two shows. We don't want to spend too much on this because it's pure speculation, and we're not just talking heads here. But
not at all.
How much do you think Tom Brady had an impact on that?
I don't know. I mean, it's tough. He won a Super Bowl under Bruce Arians, right? Like
he did under Belichick.
What could have happened where Brady only wants to come back if there's no Arians, or Arians doesn't want Tom Brady back? I mean,
I tend to agree that I think it's a very fun narrative to make, but I think it's separate. Brady's come back because he is not done. He does not like how that retirement announcement went whatsoever. Schefter is in the doghouse on that one with Brady, I'm sure. So I think this is Brady trying to rewrite his ending, and understandably so, because he's still playing at a high level. And Arians came out and said that he wanted to, once he won a Super Bowl, he wanted to step room and make room for his staff. Arians, he's done such an amazing job for the game of football and for diversity in a league that still desperately needs it. That's, I think, a big input of how and why he stepped down. He's still going to have a front office role, albeit I think he's in more of an advisory capacity. I don't think he's having real decision making power, but he has power in that organization. He's still going to be around. I do think it's separate, but ultimately Todd Bowles is going to be the next head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He already is, and I hold Bowles in a very high regard of someone that should have got more coaching looks this offseason. But very excited to see. I'm excited to see Todd Bowles back as a head coach. He got such a raw end of the stick in New York, as a lot of my Jet fans can attest. My Jet friends can attest as well.
But a head coach that Tom Brady is familiar with facing when he was with the Patriots.
Yes, and Gronk.
Yep. So Mary Kay Cabot of the Cleveland Plain Dealer reports that the Browns have called the Texans about the availability of Brandon Cooks. Possibility of a trade is currently low.
I believe this entirely of the first step, but not the second. I trust Mary Kay. Mary Kay's been on this beat for a very long time. I still remember being in high school and hearing her name all the time as well. So I trust her reporting. It makes perfect sense that a veteran like Brandon Cooks is on the block for a rebuilding Houston Texans team, although I'm sure they would like to keep him, help Davis Mills out, or let's say rookie quarterback. I think it'll be Davis Mills, but whoever they want. And it makes sense to reunite Brandon Cooks with Deshaun Watson, from their time in Houston. I do not believe that Brandon Cooks is not being shopped. I fully believe that Brandon Cooks is being offered around the league. They're seeing what offers, but I do agree that they're going to want a decent haul to trade. I don't think they're going to trade him away for a fifth like Amari Cooper. Like I think it'll be close to the third round that Devontae Parker commanded, maybe more. Brandon Cooks is a very underrated player, but what percentage chance do you think that Brandon Cooks is on any different roster come week one?
I would put it about 50-50. I mean, I think a lot of the same things that you think. That I definitely think he's on the move. He's still got plenty of football left in him, and given what we've seen with the wide receiver market, it is probably much cheaper and much more cost efficient to acquire a wide receiver through the trade market than it is through the free agent market, because wide receivers are just signing totally bananas contracts, either through extensions or in free agency. And for a team like the Browns that is really going to have to pull off some moves in order to compete with the Bengals and the Ravens, assuming that Deshaun Watson can actually play even half the games that they have on their schedule, he's going to need a little bit more help than he has on the roster right now. And I think it's a pretty strong possibility that he ends up on the Browns. I mean, possibility of a trade is currently low. That we see that with every single trade. I don't put a whole lot of stock into that.
Yeah,
I think it could easily happen.
It's low till it's not. It's low until they get an offer they like, and it's not there. But Brandon Cooks has been a 1,000-yard receiver every single year since 2015, with the exception of an invisible 2019 campaign. He's put up top 20 fantasy finishes in each of those years, as recent as last season. He can do a lot of things. Brandon Cooks is a very underrated player. If he ends up a Brown, I'd be very invested in him, despite my reservations about Deshaun Watson right now. There's a lot to consider. We'll see what ends up going on there. I would put it at a lower chance of around that 25 to 30%. I think there's a very real world. They do still want to see Davis Mills get a legitimate chance, and I don't know if they get blown away with an offer for Brandon Cooks, especially with his contract, shriveling up a little bit. But let's move on to another storyline real quick. This also can probably be a quick one. The Tennesseans, the Tennesseans, Ben Arthur believes the Titans could draft a successor to Derrick Henry in the draft. Another running back question of who's going to be drafted and where.
This is one I'm going to call smoke on. I've called fire on a lot of them, but I think the Titans think they could draft a successor to Derrick Henry. There's no running back in this year's draft that the Titans could end up with that even holds a candle to Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry is such a phenomenal player. He's been so great. And I'm not even saying in terms of talent, just in terms of what that specific running back can offer to the offense. I think that's Mike Vrabel is here to stay. He's been a very good coach for them, and his the scheme that has been installed into the offense while he's there is not going anywhere, and it revolves around a very strong running game. And unless they end up with, like, Breece Hall is the consensus RB1 in this class, even if they end up with Breece Hall, I don't see him turning into the workhorse that Derrick Henry can be. And again, Derrick Henry is a unicorn, but it's tough to think that based on how they run their offense, they think there's a running back in this class who can do that.
Now, I will say this. I completely agree. There's not a running back that can replicate the production, with the exception of maybe Breece Hall. Breece Hall will not be taken by the Titans. They will be taking a running back. That's going to happen because they lost D'Onta Foreman. D'Onta Foreman, who was productive for them. They do not have a backup running back that is really worth mentioning. They just, it's a weak depth chart behind them. D'Onta Foreman is now a Panther, as I just mentioned. Derrick Henry's coming off a season-ending injury, or not season-ending, but an injury that left him, a little bit inefficient in the playoffs. His yards per carry did drop for the first time in his career, or first time in the last 2 years, all the way down to 4.3, which is his lowest number since 2017. And that's still 219 carries. That's not a small sample size. Derrick Henry is not slowing down. Don't hear what I'm not saying. He still looks very good on field. He's still producing, and he will still get a great amount of volume. I do fully expect them to draft somebody. I will be interested in that player if it's the right one. I could totally see them. I don't think they're going to find a comment in the draft, but if they did, there's another Alabama back who is awfully big and not Derrick Henry, but could fill that role in the offense. You know what I'm talking about?
I do know who you're talking about. You've hated on this player. I'm surprised you.
This is not me talking about him in a positive light. This is me talking about him as a scheme fit for the offense of somebody that can command a workload. This is Brian Robinson we're talking about out of Alabama. Big guy, former Bama back, runs with the mean type of power that Derrick Henry runs with. He does not have the breakaway speed that Derrick Henry has at the ridiculous size. But if they want someone to come in and still be able to run the same offense that they wanted to run, Brian Robinson can do that better than most guys in this class. I'm just going to throw that out there. And he probably won't cost too much as well. Like I think that's a third, fourth round grade that he's typically receiving. That's what I would give him. And that's about where I think the Titans will spend on this. Because, again, like the Ravens, running is a very big part of their system. They lost a big part of their system, and they struggled mightily without it. So they will definitely address that, especially with D'Onta Foreman now in Carolina. Okay.
Over with.
See, you say that, but you have to realize that we have, this is from college to combine. This is what the show is about. This is about the rookie tight end of this group. We're going to go through the top 5. They're all underwhelming, kind of like the quarterbacks, except to a greater degree because it's tight end. And we were really spoiled by guys like Kyle Pitts and Pat Freiermuth, who I'm going to put in the same sentence. And it's a lot to consider that they're not great prospects, but what they are prospects that are going to be landing in good spots. The Bengals are a very tight end needy team that we will be very interested to see if one of these top 5 guys goes to Cincinnati. Despite you not being super interested, you're going to be somewhat interested. If they go to Dallas, even if Dalton Schultz on a contract year, I would be somewhat interested there. Indianapolis, Washington to a lesser extent. There are spots where I am curious to see them thrive in. But let's dive into it. Do you want to kick us off with some honorable mentions? I know you have a guy that I struggle to pronounce the name of that we want to give a shout out. That a lot of people will be surprised is not in this top 5, but we have a reason for it at least.
He was one of the Jalen Wademeyer from Texas A&M, one of the tight ends, one of the first tight ends I heard about in this class. Played at Texas A&M. He looked fine. Ran a 5.07 40-yard dash, I believe.
And that's why he's off the board.
Yeah, the hit rate on players, like I forget the exact stats that you showed me, but his speeds at the combine were in the low 20 percentiles or would have been among the low 20 percentiles of offensive linemen.
He would have been. It wasn't those weren't percentiles. He was, if you graded his athletic metrics, I believe his vertical was, what's it called? His 40 time against offensive linemen would have been, oh man, I don't want to get this wrong, but I think it would have been 13th. I sent it to you, Riley. I'm gonna pull it up right now. His vertical would have been 34th among offensive linemen. His broad jump would have been 16th. His 40 time would have been 13th. Now, testing does not show everything. That's not the end all be all. But when it comes to fantasy, I need athletic upside to be taking a shot. He does not have it. That's not where I'm interested. I know he has some nuance in his route, so I could get some hate for this, but I do not have interest in that. I'm going to give a shout out as well to Jack Brentnall on Twitter. That's where I found that. I'm not going to take credit for something I did not find. So, another one I wanted to shout out was Charlie Kohler out of Iowa State. I know a lot of people are talking about him as an athletic sleeper, but just not ahead of the 5 guys that we have ahead. He's probably right outside around that 6-7 range with Weidemeyer. So you wanna jump into it?
No, I don't. I don't like talking.
Okay, well, let's leap into it. Let's dive.
We're gonna do it anyway. Make me happy. Do something to make me smile.
I can't.
Get excited.
I'll tell you this. I kind of like the name of this guy, and our tight end 5 is Cade Otton, someone I did not know much about entering the pre-draft process, and admittedly, as I think a lot of people did, out of correct me if I'm wrong, out of Washington. Thank you so much. I won't lie, I totally forgot to make the banners, so I'm typing that as I go. But why don't you kick us off with Cade Otton?
So Cade Otton, he played on the Washington team when they were nationally ranked. In a couple of the games that we watched, and they were nationally ranked. I mean, the reason he's this low, he showed some decent nuance in his routes. He's a decent athlete, 6'5", 247. He had a 31.8 dominator, which is 92nd percentile among tight ends, which is fun to see. The reason he's number 5, and it pains me that a guy with these stats are number 5, but in 2021, he played 8 games. He had 28 receptions for 250 yards and 1 touchdown. That's 8.9 yards per reception, 43 targets in 8 games. So that's 5 point something, a little over 5 targets per game. And it's maybe I'm just in too much of a culture shock going from wide receivers to this, but even for tight ends, this production is nothing to base athletic profile on. He's a decent athlete, but we're talking about fantasy here, and in order for us to get happy about this guy for fantasy, he has to show production in college, and he never really did. He never had more than 344 yards in one college season, which he had in 2019 when he played 11 games.
Yeah, I think you all put it really well there. He was a 3-star high school recruit. He just doesn't have he's not even that good of a blocker, which really does concern me, that we really did not have the receiving production we wanted to see out of these guys. I think he's a good route runner, better than some of these guys in this class, which, there is some upside to somebody that knows how to run a route. It was fairly crisp, but, limitations as a blocker. He doesn't have the speed to make those big plays like, we've seen these late round guys tend to do. It's someone I might be interested in, due to his ball skills and due to his route running. If he goes to the right situation with the right coach, he will take a lot of development. As you mentioned, the lack of production is an issue. But yeah, I want to say Cade Otton. We're going to probably spend less time on these guys than we normally do, because there's only so much we could say about, honestly, day 3 type of prospects for a lot of these guys. So
yeah, so let's move on. I mean, these tight ends are not my thing, but we'll keep going. It's a strong class, and you gotta eat your vegetables. We like to say that. You gotta eat your greens.
See, you say that. We do have to eat your greens, but I actually kind of like this next guy. Tight end 4, Grant Calcaterra, out of SMU, has one of the weirdest draft day stories that I have ever researched and looked up. So, committed to Oklahoma, number 6 tight end recruit in the entire country. It's very difficult to properly address how weird this is, because Riley and I both just got a text that threw me for a second. I apologize for my stuttering, but he retired in 2019. It's very interesting for Grant, where he literally retired from Oklahoma and came back this past season, transferred to SMU, unretired. He retired because of concussions. That was kind of his own personal concern, and then came back and put together a fairly decent year with SMU. It's someone that I am pretty interested in because of how good of a prospect he was coming out. And again, this was high school. This was a long time ago. But he did put together a couple, string of really good games, type of things that, we didn't see from Cade. He ran a 4.62. That's a good 40 time. He's fairly athletic, put 20 together on the bench. He won't be a total liability in the blocking game. So there's a world that he's a 3-down type of tight end. He can line up in line. I think he'll line up in the slot a little bit more, but I think he's a good route runner. There's a lot to like about Grant Calcaterra. It really will come down to draft day capital, where if he gets day 2 investment, if he slips in the back of the 3rd round, I could be interested. But the tight end, the concussion history and those concerns and the lack of production beyond this past season with the retirement, that's going to be something that is worth watching come draft day. I'm curious on what the big names are going to be talking about, to be honest.
And I'm pretty much hands off this guy. I mean, I agreed to put him at number 4 just because he has higher upside than a lot of the guys we looked at. It's so scary to spend a pick on a guy like this who great for him for coming back if he thinks that his body can handle it. But it's too much of an incurring risk for me to go out and get Calcaterra.
It's all fair. I think we're picking hairs between a lot of these guys, where he is, he's a very good prospect who has a lot of the physical metrics that I want to see. He put together on the field despite, again, taking years off from football. That's what I really wanted to see, where he put up a better receiving profile than a guy like Cade Otton that we just talked about, despite taking 2 years off from football. That's difficult to do, even at SMU, a smaller school. And he was I truly believe he was going to be one of these big names we would be talking about in on day 2, back end day 1, if he stayed at Oklahoma and continued the track that people were expecting him to. Obviously, he took a left turn. I'm hoping he gets back on track here. He comes in at my tight end number 4. The tight end 3 of this class. Why don't you introduce him? Because we had some fun watching his tape.
We did have some
for all
fun.
The wrong reasons.
And yeah, it was a good amount of fun. I mean, not to rip on this guy. He's a good athlete. He's a good receiver, and that's why we ranked him accordingly. He had some not top 10 highlights when it came to blocking, man. I mean, he was just a poor blocker across the board, and again, he made plenty of plays in the receiving game, especially at Ohio State, where he was severely, overshadowed by the great trio of wide receivers that Ohio State had this year. So credit to him for even being involved as much as he was. But again, more receiving upside than the guys behind him, less blocking ability than the guys in front of him. In any other class, I mean, we would be ripping this guy down a lot more, but this is the level of talent we're dealing with this year. And in terms of fantasy, I wouldn't be surprised to see Rucker go in, maybe a day 2 or early day 3, probably at the latest. That tight ends always have weird draft capital like that. So if he ends up on the Colts, I mean, maybe he's worth a decent look, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, he's an abysmal blocker. It's pretty tough to watch. And on some level, that's good. You're going to have him line up outside. He's not going to be in line because he can't be trusted there because he throws his body like I don't know an analogy. What?
Like a bat out of heck. Haven't you heard?
Like a bat out of heck. Yes, I heard that from our amazing teacher or professor, Richard Hanley, one of the best football people. I don't know if he's actually said that, but I feel like he would. One of the best one of the best football minds we've ever had the luxury of being around. But yeah, I'm interested because he broke out at a young age. He's athletic. That's I'm not that interested in somebody that I like. His analytics are obviously unfavorable, and a lot of that is because he was sharing it with 3 first-round talents of JSN, Chris Olave, and Garrett
Garrett
Wilson,
Wilson, maybe.
the third name of the group, I guess. But
Yeah, that's all right, I guess.
the all I have to say is that there's things to like in terms of traits of athleticism, things you can't teach. Breaking out at a young age. We've been talking about Jeremy Rucker for a couple of years now because he has made that impact. And he's been at Ohio State. That's not that's being the starting tight end for that program that's a meaningful thing, and that's not something that should be totally overlooked. But I'm going to overlook it a little bit because I'm not that interested. I personally have him behind the aforementioned Grant Calcaterra, and I know Riley has him right here based on consensus. As we've been doing, consensus breaks the tie. Consensus has him ahead, so that's why he comes in at our tight end number 3. Now, tight end number 2.
Let me start about this guy.
It's a little bit more interesting.
I think this is my guy of the tight ends. If I had to pick a guy, this is my guy. I think he's the best athlete. Isaiah Likely from Coastal Carolina. He was a little bit better in blocking than Ruckert. Still not great, but I mean, at this point, we're not going to split hairs over it. 85th percentile and burst, ran a 4.88 which isn't great, but at the same time, I'm not looking for a blazing fast 40 from a tight end. Having a good burst score and having good agility is something you like to see from your tight end. He was good in the receiving game, especially for Coastal Carolina, not an S-tier offense. So just purely on tape, he's probably the best athlete out of all of them. He's a decent route runner. He was used a lot of different ways. 6'5", 245. So I'm somewhat interested in Isaiah Likely, as interested as I could be in this group. So depending on where he lands, let's give him Bengals. Why not? If he ends up on the Bengals, I'll give him a decent look in the middle of the second round in rookie drafts.
He is interesting, man, because he is fast. He is probably the fastest one of these of this group, if I'm remembering our process correctly. But that like it's someone that pops off the film of he's a solid route runner. He's he's built for that route running position. He probably won't be lining up in line, but he's not an Evan Ingram or Jeremy Ruckert-esque liability in the blocking game. I would love to see him in an offense that utilizes him in motions a little bit more, where he is put. If they can start him on wheels and match him up, like start him on one side, motion him over, get him matched up against a cornerback, he will run past that guy and catch that ball over him. There's a lot that I want to see him be used. Like, he put together a 31.4 dominator that was a 91st percentile for tight ends. Yards per reception, 81st. Breakout. He broke out at 19 years old. Yes, it's Coastal Carolina. Yes, it's the Sun Belt. It's not top tier competition. That is, that's important and fair to note. You have to paint a full picture with these guys. But he is, I think he's a lot closer to number 1 of this class than number 3. And based on his athletic profile, there's a lot that I want to see him get day two capital. I think he will get day 2 capital. But honestly, every single name in this list, with the exception of number 1, I could see ranging from day 2 to day 3. And as late as the 6th round, as early as the 2nd. Honestly, I think I can make the case for a lot of these guys. But you got any final remarks on your apparently my guy of the?
I guess he is, man. I can't help it. I got to pick one from every position.
Okay, and then I'll go. I mean, I guess I picked Grant as my guy of this group, but I also want to bring over tight end 1, Trey McBride, the most well-rounded of all these guys, comes in as the clear-cut number 1. I think that's pretty much consensus. We are not going to dip from that curve. He had a 99th percentile dominator with 46.3, which is absurd. He broke out at around 21 years old. He is now 22 and a half, give or take. A good mix of athleticism, good mix of blocking. There's a lot that I wish he did a little bit better. I wish we saw maybe more long speed than I was kind of expecting. I wish, maybe we saw some more confident blocking where sometimes he gave up on it a little bit. looks like he's jogging at times. He's that type of runner. But honestly, in terms of a safe prospect of somebody that will probably make it in the NFL, how productive he'll be for fantasy is another thing. But I think he has the highest floor of this class by a wide margin, in my opinion.
Yeah, and he has the production that really no one else in this class does. You know, he had 5 games with 100 yards. He's consistently sitting around 80, 90 in his other games. So, he had the best production. He's the best on tape. He's the best blocker. He's good after the catch. He's built very well. Athletic profile. I mean, he's a complete player. He doesn't excel in any one area, but he's complete enough to put him firmly number 1 in these rankings.
Yeah, Colorado State is obviously not the school that you're hoping for as a top tier guy. Maybe you're hoping for an Iowa or something like that, but you know, we're tight end fluctuates every single year, and despite the lesser competition, there's still something to like when you look at him as a prospect. And you know, he did what he was supposed to do. He dominated against lesser competition. He was the heart of that offense. There's something special to knowing that the ball is going to go to you and still being ridiculously productive. So I think that this is someone that will be maybe not a day one starter, but a close to a starter come halfway through the year. I think he'll make it on the field. Obviously, rookie tight ends will take time. That's something let's end it here by saying, but with a classic preach of rookie tight ends of all these groups take extreme patience, especially even these lower prospects. You can start cutting bait with them based on draft capital. You know, day 3, I don't need to waste forever, but we've seen day 3 tight ends break out constantly. You know, and I like a guy like Kylan Granson from last year. I'm still holding out a little hope for, and that's a stash of people he moved around a few dynasty rosters. But you know, these guys, if you like them now, if you find a guy that you covet, if you see a name like Grant Calcaterra who gets, let's say, 4th round investment and it's with the Cowboys, and you don't know if Dalton Schultz is their long term, call your shot, be patient with them. Rookie tight ends typically break out in their 3rd and 4th year. That's about the one you want to target. If you want to do that down the line, you can definitely do that. This is a lesser class. That's important to note as well. But I want to preach some patience with it all. You're not going to get a dynasty. You're not going to get a redraft tight end 1 this year from any of these guys. And that's not a hard bar to hit. You're not going to get a Kyle Pitts or even a Pat Freiermuth. That's not happening here. Yeah. Any final thoughts on your favorite position of this draft class, Riley?
Not my favorite. It's not my favorite. Don't tell people that.
I just did, though.
It was tough getting through this group, but hey, they're going to be NFL athletes, and I'm not, so good for them.
Yeah, and if I could trade places with them, I would do it in a heartbeat. But that is our show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I'm in a peppy mood still. So let's. Yeah, totally. But I want to give a couple shout outs as well, just like I did in the beginning, for frequency's sake at FFSQC on Twitter. Definitely worth a follow, putting on some great podcasts right here on the network. You can also check out IDP guys who help this overlay, the design, all that. It's where I've been putting out a lot of content. I also want to preach the rookie mag. We're talking rookies here. IDP guys, as well as myself, we've been making a rookie profile for every single person that you could possibly want for fantasy. That's IDP and offense included. Early bird pricing is wrapping up soon, so definitely check that out at idpguys.org. You can find all the necessary links there. I have been Michael Sicoli. You can follow me at Twitter on Michael__Sicoli. 2 underscores, as Riley wants me to point out. And obviously, Riley, you can follow as well at Riley_Millette. All great follows, might I say. I suggest, following me above everything else. But, what do I know? I'm sorry. You know what? Riley deserves it too. He puts out – Riley, what's your most recent tweet?
Most recent tweet? Let's see. Let's check the receipts. I think
what is your sample size that you want to offer to this stellar audience?
I'll just take my most recent tweet and we'll go with that. Maybe – it was actually about the Jose Ramirez contract extension for the Cleveland Guardians, where I praised The Athletic for having really good reporting and really good writing. By The Athletic. Super good.
That is, I'll not hashtag not a sponsor, as the fancy football would say.
No free
But
clout.
the Athletic,
The
free clout, because the Athletic is where we aspire to be one day. So that is our show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I hope everyone has a good night. I hope everyone enjoys their evening. See you next week, next Wednesday.